Welcome, everyone, to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. My name is Alan Miller, and I'm a member of the program committee for ICSS Sunday morning sessions. We're based in Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, USA. Our weekly programs are online via Zoom every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time. You can sign up at our website, ICSSmarx.org, to receive weekly email announcements for our Sunday sessions. Today's session is on imperialism and fascism in the 21st century. It's part of an ongoing series of presentations and discussions on this topic, and a timely topic it is. Our speakers today are members of the ICSS Program Committee, Raj Sahai and Mehmet Bayram, who will each present their views on the subject. We're going to start the presentations with Raj, followed by Mehmet, and after a short break for announcements, each of our speakers will make short commentaries on the subject in order to kick off the question and answer part of our session. We'd like everybody to pay attention, take some notes, jot down your questions and comments. We hope to have a lively discussion on this very important topic today. So welcome everyone to Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. And Raj, if you would proceed, please go ahead.
Right. So
I'll let you know on your share. Go ahead.
So you can see
You're
my
okay.
slides.
You're
Yeah,
okay.
All right. I'm going to start by, first of all, going to Lenin to talk about what is imperialism. Because
skip down to your first slide. You can go down.
This is the first slide, actually.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
This
Sorry.
is the first slide. So imperialism, there is some two understandings about imperialism, or there is some confusion. So let me go through what Lenin describes imperialism, what it is. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism itself, according to Lenin. So that's one thing. It is not separate from capitalism. It has three dimensions: economic, military, ideological. Okay. And it is, excuse me, it's, again, it's Lenin's concept that he described in his 1916 pamphlet on imperialism. The economic essence of imperialism is monopoly capitalism. That is the essence of it. The struggle for and seizure of sources of raw materials, especially for the basic and most highly cartelized industries, is a characteristic of imperial stage of capitalism. Monopoly banks from modest middlemen enterprises turn into the monopolists of finance capital. Finance capital is bank money capital applied to industries. That's the definition of finance. Monopoly grows out of colonial policy. And later on, you can add neocolonial policy. To the numerous old motives of colonial policy, finance capital has added the struggle for the export of capital for monopoly profits. So Lenin didn't write his pamphlet. He wrote it in a time when there was colonial occupations of vast, about 80% of the world was people, 85% of the people of the world, 80 to 85% were under that. So that brings me to my second slide on that. Exploitation of small or weak nations by a handful of the most powerful nations, monopolies, oligarchy, domination. Imperialism is, according to Lenin, parasitic or decaying capitalism. So it's parasitic and decaying capitalism. Parasitism, the creation of the rentier state, in which the bourgeoisie to an ever increasingly degree live on the proceeds of the capital exports and on its super profits. And this is what we saw earlier, and I think this is what we saw also from 1991 onwards, when capital was applied to China. So this is Lenin's concept can be applied to our times. Tendency to decay. In the epoch of imperialism, certain branches of industry, certain strata of the bourgeoisie, and certain countries betrayed to a greater or lesser degree, now one and now another, these tendencies, decay. Overall, capitalism grows far more rapidly in imperialism, but which also manifests itself in the decay of the countries in which are the richest in capital. So Britain in around 1900 onwards, G7 now. For example, see Midwestern towns. You just have to look at the pictures of the formerly industrialized Midwestern towns. What has happened there? Imperial stage is a capitalism in transition, according to Lenin, from vital to moribund. Moribund means on deathbed. That's how he defines imperialism in the economic essence of it. So imperialism stage is a stage of weakness of capitalism, not strength, because many of our Marxist friends believe is the period of strength of capitalism. Okay, so that's why I thought it was very important to clarify that. Now I come to military power dimension of imperialism. Military acts as a bailiff, according to Lenin, for monopoly capitalism. So it is secondary to the economic essence of imperialism. It's important, but it is secondary. Ideological dimension, this influences the victims to believe the imperialist country or countries, for example, G7, are a force for good, not just for themselves, but for the exploited countries as well, as they help democracy and human rights. It also convinces workers inside the imperialist countries that the capitalists are job producers, for example. So, whereas it is the workers who produce the capitalists in capitalist system, but it's inverted in ideologically, and that's what workers are convinced of. The economic dimension, however, is the heart of the imperialist stage of capitalism. If you look at, if the simile is body, military is the muscle, ideology the mind. However, military and ideology depend on the economic dimension. If the heart fails, neither the muscle nor the brain works. Death occurs. Okay, we know that. Okay, imperialist stage of capitalism was reached in 1900. Around 1900, it began developing in the fourth quarter of the 19th century. Now, Britain was conquering and colonizing much of the world from 1757, when it first established a colony in Bengal, in India. But neither Marx nor Lenin called that period the imperialist stage of capitalism. You can see Ben Norton's video about what the British did in India in the first 50 years. He's researched that out. Imperialism is global, binding all countries in its chain, which was broken in 1917 in Russia, and in 1949 in China, then Korea, Vietnam, finally Cuba. So this is the importance of the 20th century socialist revolution. From 1945 to about 1975, the US emerged as the most powerful capitalist country, and it was a vital capitalism. Okay, it was not in the moribund stage, which Lenin called imperialism. Okay, we are in the imperialist epoch, but there are fluctuations in the epoch between vitality and moribund condition. So this is important to keep in mind. Massive amount of capital was destroyed in World War I and II, and that is why capitalism came out of the moribund condition. It became full of vitality. Okay. The military dimension enlarged, kept on enlarging all through. There's no question about it. Okay, but that was also the case with Britain before 1875, which period Lenin did not describe as a stage of imperialism. Nuclear weapons were added starting in 1945. By 1973, capitalism once again reached its highest stage of imperialism with its epicenter in the US, because capital kept on accumulating, and capital comes in three forms. It's money capital. Oftentimes when we think of capital, people think of money, but it is in three forms: in commodities, money, as well as in production. Okay, disunity between the USSR and China, or contention between them, who's going to lead the socialist bloc, was exploited by the US, which put a lot of pressure on the USSR in arms race. And Reagan did it using vast expansion of credit to make this arms race with USSR. That led to the collapse of the USSR. That's a mistake the rulers there made. Revisionism started in 1956 in the USSR and later resulting in Russian nationalism. I believe revisionism is what also China entered into later on. First criticized, later on, they themselves became revisionist. So that later resulted in Russian nationalism. Today it is Chinese nationalism that's rising. So these were the internal factors for the demise of the USSR, and those are the larger factors. I'm not saying the external factor was the main thing. Anyway, capitalism, thanks to China's labor power, cheap labor power, returned from moribund stage once again to vital stage for 2 decades, from 1990 around to 2008, 9. You know, 8 is a term, so it's not quite 2 decades. The compulsion was much more for as much for the US and EU to invest in China as it was for China to have that capital invested in to go towards capitalism in 1989. But CPC very critically maintained control, okay, over the society, over the process, and unlike the weak states. So it was not overthrown. Chinese capitalism is not the same as Western capitalism. I don't belong to the people who think there are two groups of imperialists. Chinese capital formed and accumulated. Capitalism reached again to the moribund stage by 2008, and as you saw in the crash, the Great Recession, okay, which was solved by further expansion of credit, as you know. India under BJP now is attempting to repeat the Chinese model, using US, Euro, Japanese, and Chinese overproduction capital. You know, basically, capital is overproducing, and they want to use in India, and they all are hoping that this will stave off the next big crisis. So capitalism again may revitalize for a decade at best, but it will further shift the power to Asia. This is what's going on. The power is shifting towards Asia because Asia is now not the same Asia as it was prior to 1945, okay? The 20th century socialist revolution and national liberation movements have changed the world such that capitalism can develop in the third world countries, in those countries that are large and have political power centered firmly. They can be in small countries also, but important thing, they should have a firm political control of the bourgeoisie or of social democrats or communists. You know, they are using capitalism. So this is what is different about the 21st century. 21st century is not the same as the 20th century first quarter, okay? BRICS formed in 2009 as an economic association of non-imperialist countries in which capitalism was the system of production to develop their economies free from the imperialist pressures of G7. Now, the G7 can't prevent it. So it is multipolarity, which is in my opinion, and I think Richard said that independently, Richard Fallenbaum, is a democratic revolution at geopolitical level. So you have to view countries, today geopolitics and geoeconomics are intertwined. You can't separate them. This is a proof that capitalism is in its weak stage of imperialism in G7. US-led G7 control of the world is finished. Now they're desperately trying in Ukraine and also Middle East, and it's not working in either place. So I will go to fascism. And I'll start by quoting from the Communist International 1928, which says, and I'm quoting directly from there, under special historical conditions, the progress of the bourgeois, imperialist, reactionary offensive assumes the form of fascism under special history. What are these historical conditions? A, the instability of capitalist relationships, the existence of considerable D-class social elements, which we are seeing increasingly also in the United States, the pauperization of broad strata of the urban petty bourgeoisie and of the intelligentsia. We don't quite see it, but it is a tendency towards that. Disconnect among the rural petty bourgeoisie. So some of these elements you're seeing there, even in the United States and much of the world. B, menace of mass proletarian action. The menace of this we don't see. To stabilize, at least in the United States, we don't see it yet. To stabilize and perpetuate its rule, the bourgeoisie is compelled to an increasing degree to abandon the parliamentary system in favor of the fascist system, which is independent of inter-party arrangements, like Democrats and Republicans here, and combinations. You could see Harris was running with Cheney's daughter. This is what is at play at the US and in parts of Europe. Now I come to the question, does MAGA politics indicate rising fascism? MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, coined by Trump or his people, harkens back to time when high school pass US workers, mostly white males, had industrial well-paying jobs with a defined pension plan and healthcare benefits, and colleges were free or affordable to their children. Women were homemakers and part-time workers after the kids went away to work or college. That's when I came to this country, 1966. That was what was going on. Democratic Party, which had support of well-paid union workers through 1960s, and Republican Party, which had support of the small business owners, which were very numerous, and college-educated suburban white men and women, lost the support of these as jobs shifted to China in the 1990s. So the Democratic Party then sought support of the monopoly finance capitalists, and the Republican Party also of some of that, but large industrial capitalists as well. Both used the money to mislead workers that good times lie just slightly ahead. You remember, Bill Clinton saying, what will the American workers do when the job shift to China? Well, said they will all become supervisors. I remember that. Trump exposed them both and won in 2016. Both parties he exposed, and again in 2024. Now, interesting, Biden won 2020 because of COVID mishandling. Okay, that was clearly mishandling by Trump, but he also, more importantly, promised the infrastructure investment in the United States, and he did make some. And he also said raising of taxes on the rich, and he won by 5 million votes over Trump. Now Trump this time has got roughly 100,000 more votes than he got in 2020, but Harris is, I think, 2.5 million votes less than him. So she got 7.5 million votes less than what Biden got. And they didn't turn towards communist parties. Communist parties together barely got little more than 0.5%. The workers just sat out. I mean, those are mostly workers. The Great Recession of 2007 and 8 convinced vast majority of workers that both parties are lying to them. The government rescued the big capitalists, too big to fail, and printed trillions of dollars that were not backed by work done by labor. this fictitious capital has led to sharp rise in prices of all commodities. Now, the lower half of US workers cannot survive now as they used to be able to do before 1970s. Okay. And Lenin talks about the condition of revolution. He said, when the workers, when the population can live like they used to be able to, and the other condition is the ruling class can rule like they used to be able to, then the condition is ready. But there is a third condition. But let me go on. Does MAGA indicate rising fascism? Now, I think you hear different thing from Mehmet later on, probably. But in my opinion, Trump's MAGA movement does not represent fascism, at least at present. It is rather an attempt to return to old capitalism, in which social hierarchy would be the way to control the workers and full freedom given to capitalists. MAGA will cut social spending and reduce social wages, use high technology and AI. I mean, that's when I say MAGA, I mean Trump's rule. And AI to increase production efficiency to make US production more competitive in the world markets. Now, Trump is saying he's going to increase tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada, and he just said he's going to have 100% taxes on BRICS countries. Okay, well, okay, just what he's saying is basically American standard of living will go half. I mean, you're going to buy half the product because that's what American workers live on. So he's basically taking United States back to a very old time. Imperialist wars, either enlarging the current or adding new, Trump is unlikely to do, in my opinion. He wants to bring Russia and India on the US side to isolate China and reduce its power by tariffs on its commodities. I do not see, I mean, fascism is an aggressive system that conquers other countries to regenerate its imperialist, its capitalism, which is moribund. I don't see Trump doing that. Okay, I could be wrong, and I'll wait to hear what Mehmet presents on that. The new alignment that Democrat Party has attempted, let's turn to the liberals, the Democrats. They have identity, based, identity politics. Women who are free of men, that's their idea. Children who are free of parents. Gender is free from nature. Harris was running a moderate Republican Party campaign with this kind of idea, plus the moderate Republicans against what was George Wallace-like campaign of Trump. And George Wallace didn't win at that time. Of course, he was shot and he couldn't run, but he also wouldn't have won, but Trump won, and Trump was luckier than Wallace. And imagine the American politics, they would try to kill him twice. So who is fascist? I mean, to me, I don't think Trump represents fascism. He doesn't represent anything good, but not fascism, in my opinion. Okay, European fascism in 1920 to 45 period was a response to capitalist crisis of overproduction in Germany, lacking access to markets, blocked by large colonial imperialist power. Both Italy and Germany were under pressure from its working classes, organized by the communists. Fascism attempted to solve this problem by aggressive militarist means, suppressing workers' militancy, conquering Eastern Europe and the USSR. So that's what fascism was that time. Fascism have different faces. It will be different now. The socialist revolution of the 20th century helped overthrow colonialism. This is a very important achievement, where masses struggle so heroically inspired and assisted by the socialist country. So recolonization has become impossible. Neocolonization was an attempt to reassert domination, 1950s onwards, actually from 45 onward, but it fails and turns out badly for the imperialist country. North Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, African countries, Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, the pink tide in Latin America show that imperialism can't succeed, as did Britain in the 18th and 19th century. They succeeded, but Americans are not succeeding. Okay, so it is failing in Palestine, it's failing everywhere. Today, markets are open to all capitalists. It's not like the case of Germany and Italy in 1930. Overproduction is the issue, from vast accumulation of capital that can keep on producing, but limited ability of consumption of the masses who are in debt already. Environmental disaster is now a big danger. World war with nuclear holocaust, regional wars have failed. World war with nuclear holocaust is a possibility, so everybody's afraid. So they're afraid to go there, the contending capitalists. Regional wars have failed. So G7 is stuck. Okay, so I'm hoping to finish it very soon. In India, neocolonialism failed. First Nehru-led Congress, now Modi-led BJP, which today represents the monopoly capital of India, give their state greater sovereignty than the rulers of Britain, France, Germany, and Japan. Russia, despite the breakup of the USSR, a devastated economy in 1990s, has regained its sovereignty. Ukraine war proves it. And of course, China, Vietnam, and even tiny Laos have more sovereignty than when they were colonized and semi-colonized countries through mid-20th century. China is, of course, a second most powerful country economically in the world, and its military dimension is also coming along. So there are new fascist forms arising, neo-fascism, third war fascism, which I don't know, I can't speak on, but Mehmet will. Neo-fascism is rising in the US, I agree, as it decays. But I would not pin it just on Trump. I think it's just a general phenomena. The EU is also decaying as capitalism gains ascendancy in Asia. Modi, most Indian Marxists believe, is using Hindutva as a neo-fascist ideology to consolidate political power, to rapidly push India to be the third largest economy by 2029. That's 5 years from now, in the way CPC consolidated as a communist party and rapidly developed capitalism in China. So the conclusion, my last slide, imperialism is the moribund stage of capitalism, reached around 1900, and the US became the workshop of the world. After 1945, due to destroyed capital, capitalism became vital again. Now it is within, I don't mean to say we are not in the imperialist epoch, we are, but there are fluctuations. It went to vital, capitalism returned to moribund stage, accumulation in Japan and Europe by 1973 to 75. US war cost in Indochina plus Korean War earlier led to dollar to be a promissory note backed by oil revenues from the Gulf, which agreement they got with these Gulf countries in 1973. Gold was let go. Credit expansion solved stagflation by Reagan. Arms race broke USSR. Chinese workers exploited by Western capital, surplus capital, made capitalism vital again. In 1990s, but by 2008, accumulation returned again to its moribund stage. Capitalism vitality has shifted to Asia. G7 cannot recover without World War III. Colonialism impossible, and neocolonialism also does not work. US workers hope to return to the past. So far, that's what they are hoping. Voted for Trump. 7.5 million who did not vote for Harris just sat out. They could have voted for the couple of socialist parties, but they sat out. It won't happen. Neo-fascism will rise unless stopped by communists, and communists succeed. Socialism needs a new vision, in my opinion, to organize US workers to decide to stop fascism. We can't simply repeat Lenin today. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Our next speaker on the topic is Mehmet. So Mehmet, if you want to go ahead and set up your screen share, don't forget to optimize for audio and video setting. And unmute. We can see your screen, but okay, good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, good. Thank you, Alan, and also thank you, Raj. Very good, presentation on the roots of imperialism and fascism. When I started, I knew that Raj was going to bring the basics of both imperialism and fascism. So after working on it for a while, I thought it would be, repetition. So I took out those, wanted to get back to the, again, to the points where we may differ. And especially in neocolonialism and the fascism that we see today. I will start by saying that with the election of Trump, yes, we do have a threat of fascism, but like Raj, I do not limit it to Trump himself. But it is Raj put it very well, it is a development stage. Imperialism comes to the moribund stage where, at that stage, capitalism cannot provide for the masses, and so it's in crisis. I connect the rise of fascism to this crisis, and it goes beyond Trump. So let me start with a video that I want to share. Some of these you may know, but I just want to put here so that it provides the background.
Well, this protest outside this building, very close to the White House, in fact, is because of an alt-right conference that's going on here. We've already seen it get very heated indeed. Particularly when one of the people attending the conference went into the crowd of protesters.
They started calling us Nazis, which is incorrect because I'm not a racist. I'm a very tolerant person.
So what is the alt-right? Well, it includes white nationalists, white supremacists, anti-Semites, Islamophobes, and there are those who feel that alt-right is essentially code for neo-Nazi.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Filmed by The Atlantic, this was what was going on inside the conference.
To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror. We build, we produce, we go upward.
Earlier in the day, we were allowed in too, but with outsiders watching, the tone was different.
I do think that we have, you could say, a psychic connection or a deeper connection with Donald Trump.
It was clear, though, that while Donald Trump says he denounces racism, far-right leaders here feel their ideas help shape him as a candidate and will guide him as president.
He certainly wasn't elected on repeal Obamacare or anything like that. This is why he was elected, because he was the identity president.
Many in the room told me of their excitement at a Donald Trump presidency.
This is the first time in a very long time I've been interested in mainstream politics.
Because someone was talking your language?
Someone was touching on something very real.
But can you understand why Muslim Americans, for example, why African Americans might be concerned, might be worried now?
Well, what about us? Can they understand why we might be concerned? That we are being replaced and being forced to become minorities in our own countries? Yes, this is a massive replacement, ongoing.
Well, I've spent a lifetime fighting for these causes since I was a teenager. I've always felt that a homogeneous state is a happier state.
Just imagine by accident of birth that you had been born African American.
If I were African American, I hope I would feel the way I feel now, that I would dedicate myself to improving my people and to living with my people. And I would have no trouble with white people who wanted to live with white people.
And whether he likes it or not, people with these views feel emboldened by Trump's victory.
America was, until this past generation, a white country, designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation. It is our inheritance, and it belongs to us.
Now, I know we are going to get into what fascism is and not, but taken from a liberal, actually, writer, Chris Hedges, He says Walmart, Amazon, Apple, Citibank, so on and so forth. Capitalism functions very efficiently without democracy. So a bourgeois democracy is not a must of our system. Actually, going back to historical materialism and to Engels, we know that even the bourgeois democracy is actually a bourgeois dictatorship. That's very important. That's the other side of the coin, is that it is a bourgeois dictatorship. And bourgeois democracy, I think, is just to let them go pass by if they can't exercise their dictatorship openly. And this has shown, especially after the demise of the Soviet Union, that's why we are seeing a rise in right-wing fascism all over the world. But here he says, fascism is an amorphous and incoherent ideology. It wraps itself in the most cherished symbols of the nation, in our case, the American flag, white supremacy, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Christian cross. It celebrated hypermasculinity, misogyny, racism, and violence. It allows disenfranchised people, especially disenfranchised white men, to regain a sense of power, however illusory, and sanctifies their hatred and rage. It embraces a utopian vision of moral renewal and vengeance to coalesce around an anointed political savior. It is militaristic, anti-intellectual, and contemptuous of democracy, especially when the established ruling class mouths the language of liberal democracy, but does nothing to defend it. It replaces culture with nationalist and patriotic kitsch. It sees those outside the close circle of the nation state or the ethnic or religious group as contaminants who must be physically purged, usually with violence, to restore the health of the nation. It perpetuates itself through constant instability, for its solutions to its ills besetting the nation are transitory, contradictory, and unattainable. Most importantly, fascism always has a religious coloring, mobilizing believers around rites and rituals, using sacred words and phrases, and embracing an absolute truth that is heretical to question. I think there's a new book that's coming out from the Trump side where they openly declare that those who are opposing Trump are not human beings. And when Trump said that people will be killed, especially with the 2025 Project 2025, when asked about this, one of his top advisors openly said, so what if few people get killed? So this is the mentality we are talking about that came with Trump. Now, he also says, Chris Hedges also says, Trump may be finished politically, but the political and social decay that created Trump remains. This decay will give rise to new, perhaps more competent demagogues. I fear the rise of Christian fascists endowed with political skill, self-discipline, focus, and intelligence that Trump lacks. The longer we remain politically paralyzed, the more certain Christian fascism becomes. The January 6th mob assault on the Capitol 2 years ago, the polarization of the electorate into antagonistic tribes, the economic misery afflicting the working class, the rhetoric of hate and violence, and the current dysfunction in the Congress is but a glimpse of the nightmare ahead. I'm seeing Germany, 1930s. So we come to, how did we get here? Again, one of the authors on fascism, Henry Giro, says, it has taken too long for the American media, analysts, educators, and cultural critics to connect Trump and his MAGA movement to fascism, regardless of the fact that their rhetoric, actions, and policies echo a dark and dangerous past. Underlying such silence was an inability to recognize that fascism comes in many shapes, elements, forms, and symbols. This is very important because I think many people who want to talk about fascism, who are listening to the rhetoric of fascism, they immediately think that fascism has to come with like a toothbrush, mustache, and what happened in Germany in 1930s or Italy in 1920s, 30s. So here we have an ideology that has been spread, again, an American exceptionalism, thinking that it will not happen here. Not understanding capitalism, fascism, or imperialism leads to another American exceptionalism, thinking fascism is not suited for the US, but which fascism? Will fascism appear exactly like it did in 1920s, 30s in Europe? We know, everybody has heard, when fascism comes to America, it will come wrapped in the flag and waving the cross. Now, again, this is very interesting. The Holocaust scholar Leonard Grob has written that fascism, however, has many shapes and sizes. I'm particularly emphasizing this because I want to get away from that mindset that fascism has to be exactly like, if it doesn't adhere to the conditions of Germany and Italy in 1920s, 30s, then it's not fascism. He says, fascism bundles ideological ingredients such as authoritarian, anti-democratic, and supremacist nationalism, xenophobic population and immigration policies, favored economic status for a few, suppressed rights for union and labor, intentional and intensified political divisiveness, weaponizing courts and police to exact retributive punishment of internal enemies, disrespect for truth, political control of media and schools, religious legitimization. Trump and MAGA republicanism bundle such elements in 2020's America. Fascism is alive in the United States, so much so that it is not a hyperbole to say that American fascism's face is Donald Trump's. As Charlottesville and the January 6th insurrection testify, American fascism harbors anti-Semitism, and it can be added that anti-Semitism in the United States, whenever and wherever it's found, favors fascism. The tropes of anti-Semitism are both old and renewed as they are recycled and amplified with modern technology and social media. This is Leonard Grob. So Donald Trump has become the face of fascism, but it is not Donald Trump that has created fascism. To create a fascist movement, a leader must be created. If it wasn't Trump, I'm sure somebody else would have come, or the Democratic Party would have done what Trump is doing, but in a less, apparent way. The US, the leading metropolitan country, has come to a certain level of capitalist development, and the world situation was mature enough to merit a transition to fascism. Transition. Soviet Union is gone. Capitalism can't provide for the masses. Capitalism has turned into a monopoly, oligopoly system. Masses are hopeless, disillusioned. Quality of life is down the drain. Production moved offshore to greener pastures. Black and brown faces are freer in the eyes of the white male nationalist, racist masses who long for the good old days of slavery, Jim Crow, and male-dominated society so they can get their right to good jobs as white males. Remember that video a few minutes ago? As Simone Signore expressed, nostalgia is not what it used to be. The US needs more wars to hold on to the leadership role in the world as new rivals snip at its feet. The time is right for fascism to appear. The conditions that brought fascism to Spain, Italy, Germany are nearly identical. A deep economical and political crisis, contradictions between the ruling classes' factions, a vacuum of hegemony, the failure and collapse of liberal democracy, the destruction of the petty bourgeoisie, the disillusionment of the masses, and the failure of the revolutionary forces. Sounds familiar? A state of hopelessness and no solution to daily miseries lead to a longing of an authority to come and fix the issues. A strong leader was needed, and no BS commander who would solve the crisis. In the 21st century, the crisis is permanent, and cannot be solved. This is very important. It's permanent and cannot be solved because of capitalism's own contradictions. A permanent crisis then develops the feeling of the requirement for a permanent, strong, fierce, unwavering leader, since capitalism is no longer able to and is unwilling to share its booty in the age of monopoly capitalism, even in the metropolitan centers. Fascism can probably be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power. This is what allegedly Benito Mussolini has said, although the meaning of the corporate there could be interpreted differently. He used that as well. But he says the fascist state lays claim to rule in the economic field no less than in others. It makes its action felt through the length and breadth of the country by means of its corporate, social, and educational institutions, and all the political, economic, and spiritual forces of the nation organized in their respective associations circulate within the state. This is important because central to the idea of fascism is the state. And as we're going to see, state, although the neoliberals, say they hate the state and they want to get rid of the state, but central to all of their doings is the state, both in metropolitan countries and much, much more in the neo-colonial countries that we will come to. So there is no one size fits all. I'm harping on this. Fascism. Every location, history, class position, level of struggle, local and general crisis of capitalism breeds its own kind of fascism. Angelo Tasca says fascism has many forms and each one of them even shows contradictory trends. So let's not try to pinpoint whether India is fascist or Egypt is fascist. Every one of them had their own unique experience. But one thing that we can say at the core of the definition of fascism that stays throughout the world is that what George Dimitrov called the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital. Remember that video that we opened with. So we had a session maybe 3 years ago or so on revolutions, and Marxism is a revolutionary thought. So we have to understand what happened with the so-called bourgeois revolutions. And so we are seeing that fascism did not materialize in England or France, where the capitalism developed earlier, but became successful in Germany, Italy, and Japan, where, look, all these have the bourgeois revolutions were completed late, but they were late. However, this was not due to their being developed or not. This country is more developed. No. Rather, it was due to unequal development of capitalism. Unequal development of capitalism is political development and the transition to the imperialist stage. Bourgeois revolutions were rapid and developed from the bottom up in France and the US. However, bourgeois revolutions occurred in a backward way, top to bottom, and slowly in countries like Italy, Germany, Japan, and Russia. Fascism was successful in countries where capitalism developed slowly and late. Very interesting, I think, relationship there. Then comes imperialism. In countries where the bourgeoisie had completed their revolution, completed the bourgeois revolution, the transition to imperialism was essential to grab colonies for the capitalist economic crisis of overproduction. Raj went through these, so I'm not going to go in there. He did a real superb job. Lenin shows that Germany was even ahead of the US in industry, finance capital, production, and organization. However, Germany was left behind in acquiring colonies. So imperialism and colonialism kind of go together. A rising imperialist lacking colonies was a deep crisis within the national bourgeoisie. National bourgeoisie. Here we come to, again, to the bourgeois revolutions and the creation of national bourgeoisie. This is going to be central in understanding what fascism is. the national bourgeoisie becomes more greedy, vicious, reckless, and aggressive in Germany because they don't have colonies and all the others have. So here we have Max Horkheimer, who says, those who don't talk about capitalism have no right to talk about fascism. But then Poulantzas, the Greek philosopher, Marxist philosopher, says, no, those who don't talk about imperialism have no right to talk about fascism. So it's not capitalism now that we're talking about related to fascism, but it's actually imperialism. In the late developing metropolitan imperialist countries like Germany, Italy, the top-down bourgeois revolutions in Germany, Japan had their toll on the national bourgeoisie and other classes of these countries. We're again talking national bourgeoisie. The petit bourgeoisie of these countries went through a hard, shocking, and traumatic period, facing the realities of top-down forced monopolization, loss of markets, and dispossession. The middle classes were in fear and panic in an environment where they could not understand the changes or didn't know how to deal with them. It's a chaos. Capitalist development kept impoverishing the working class. The environment for fascism to flourish had developed. Not only the upper classes, but also the middle classes were also in panic, fearing the wrath of a revolution. Elimination of the previously ruling classes from power, the feudal lords' creation of a new association of nation, etc., had to be done rapidly now to catch up with those who had achieved this in a relatively more stable way. To do this, collaborating with the landed aristocracy in a bourgeois conservative coalition in a contradictory old and new way created the force from above to change the society. This coalition, by its very nature, preserved the conservative forces to defeat the reaction from below, the working classes. The democratic requests from the working classes were stifled and contained. This condition brought a more severe reaction from the working classes, a condition the new bourgeoisie could not manage before it grew stronger and developed this liberal ideology to handle the situation. You see, I'm throwing this back at the class level to the state of the bourgeoisie. So when what happened in the neo-colonial countries? Now we are turning our view to the neo-colonial countries. Most neo-colonial countries, when bourgeoisie revolutions were taking place, they just came to life when bourgeois revolutions were happening in Europe and everywhere. Neither their capitalism nor their bourgeoisie even had the chance to develop. When these countries were allowed to become so-called sovereign, the competitive age of capitalism had finished, completed, and closed. The imperialist stage under the dictatorship of the monopoly finance capital had been established. By the very nature of their sovereignty, they were made and born dependent on the world markets, capitalism, technology, finance, and politics, all controlled by imperialists. Imperialism is a dictatorship, not a democracy. You can't have democracy under imperialism. Their bourgeoisie never even entertained the ideals, frustrations, ambitions, greed, and stamina of the national bourgeoisie of the imperialist countries. Their place was to be a dependent middleman. Their
About 5 more minutes.
Okay, so they are dependent, and they don't have the means of the imperialist countries' national bourgeoisie. Imperialism does not install democracy in neo-colonies. Colonization is not a democratic process. It is a prison. If you believe that prisons can be run democratically, then you can believe that those neo-colonial countries, the newborn countries, 1948s, 49s, you know, or at the time of mature imperialism, when they are born, if you think that they can, imperialism will allow them to be democratically exploited, well, you better believe that Simpson and Alcatraz was run democratically too. So the bourgeoisie of these neo-colonial countries are not national bourgeoisies, not, because they don't defend their turf. They don't defend their wealth, their resources, but they're the middlemen. They just sell it at fire prices to imperialism to be the middleman. So that's why you can have elections and so on and so forth, but it's all a show. So the system there is a permanent fascism. In metropolitan countries, it's not permanent. You can go to bourgeois democracy and you can go to fascism and then come back to bourgeois democracy. But the system, the state in these neo-colonial countries are fascist by itself. So you have an open fascism when things get really hard and the army or so, do the crackdown. And when that changes, you still don't go back to bourgeois democracy because their bourgeoisie is not equipped for it. But you go to more of a concealed and mild form of fascism. So here's my famous or infamous graphic that I've been showing for many, many years now. You have the capitalist states with two different types of capitalist states. The neo-colonial type fascist states, the ones that emerged at the late imperialist stage. They never saw the competitive side of capitalism that Marx writes about, and the bourgeois democratic state. See, when fascism is needed, the bourgeois democracy goes from bourgeois democratic governance to governance of fascism and then comes back. But the neo-colonial type fascists don't go to bourgeois democracies. They don't have it. So they go from one form of fascism to the other form of fascism. So talking about transition, we go back home now. Why are we talking about this topic? It is not because we want to just learn about fascism, but we are facing an emerging, rising fascism, with or without Trump, doesn't matter. I think what Trump is going to do, and the Democrats will love him for it, is establish with that Project 225 and that new law, what is that, 4249 or so, that gives the powers to the president to close down anything at all. So they will use that after Trump. And Trump will be the bad guy and they will be the good guys. So fascism was successful in Europe utmost because the left and the working class were divided, lacked proper leadership, and did not have a class perspective that blinded the movements. So not understanding the danger of fascism, the left made fatal mistakes while fascism was escalating. Let's not make the same mistakes and join forces to prevent a complete transfer to fascist dictatorship. A united front against fascism is the way to go now before it gets too late. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehmet. Boy, both of you stayed within your allotted time. I'm in shock. Anyway.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Yeah. After a few short announcements, we're going to have brief comments by our speakers, followed by Q&A from participants. So first of all, next Sunday on December 8th at 10:30, again, Pacific time, AM, we're going to have a presentation, The Indian Subcontinent, the Current Dumping Ground of Neoliberal Crisis and the Emerging Revolutionary Upsurges. Our speaker will be Basudev Nag Chaudhry of the People's Brigade, who will be speaking on the recent dramatic developments on the Indian subcontinent, including Sri Lanka, where the Communist Party, JVP, scored sweeping electoral victories, the coup in Bangladesh, and the unrest in Pakistan since the arrest of the ex-president Imran Khan. This is going to be a very informative session on a critically important part of the world. We're going to get an on-the-ground Basudev is actually organizing in that area. He's going to be coming to us from India and will be speaking about what's actually going on, sweeping across the continent. So what we're going to have right now is I also want to remind you that you can sign up for email notifications of our programs at ICSSmarx.org, where you can find links to video recordings of our past programs. You can contact us with feedback, suggestions for future programs, topics, and speakers. And you can also make a donation to support our Sunday morning programs. And we do have expenses for putting this up. So we have a lot of very active comments in the chat during the presentations. I want to encourage people to raise your hand by using the reactions button at the lower part of your screen. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift and have 5 minutes of comments each from Raj and then Mehmet. So Raj, if you would please unmute and make your comment.
Yeah, I appreciate Mehmet's presentation. We have a lot in common, but there are some differences. So I think Mehmet believes that third world nations are under the control of imperialist countries, which is basically G7, and they don't have a way out. And capitalism cannot develop. I believe capitalism is developing there. My examples of capitalism developing successfully are right now in India, in Indonesia, and maybe a few other countries. But I think, and in my sense is that neocolonialism is a failed policy as after the socialist revolution and national liberation movements of the 20th century. So you cannot go back to imperialism. And that's the crisis, because imperialist countries are failing to dominate. And as can be seen, that they are not succeeding, let's say, after 20 years of trying to contain a backward country like Afghanistan, the United States was forced out. And in 1 year, more than a year of concentrated bombing, every kind of thing done to Gaza, the Hamas resistance still standing, and Israel as a proxy for the United States has not been able to subdue them, and they were forced to make a peace, a temporary halt with Hezbollah. So I think basically I see Trump-led movement, and I grant that there are fascist groups in the United States, racist groups that want to take the United States back to that condition of Jim Crow. But if you want to call America as a fascist country of that time, that's a different matter. United States was not a fascist country. It did not in 1930s choose to go fascist way when the crisis was there. And it can go, but a tendency is there. But the problem right now is that the pressure is high on G7 because they cannot provide their masses what their masses are used to, the standard of living. And so my difference is that basically the idea of third world fascism, I disagree. I don't think it's convincing to me. And I think, but fascism is rising in the US, with Mehmet, I agree. And I think it's actually facilitated. Mehmet said the same thing by both parties. So, but the crisis is of economy that cannot provide for people as it used to be able to do. So that's all I want to say in response.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mehmet, if you would please take a few minutes and just make some comments, and then we're going to move to the Q&A from participants. So people start going down to the reactions button, raising your hand if you want to participate in this discussion. So Mehmet, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Raj, for the questions. I had other questions from your presentation, but I'll go with the answers to what you asked recently. First of all, I'm seeing something that's very wrong to me, is that you are separating neocolonialism from imperialism as if they oppose each other. They don't. Neocolonialism is the method of extraction of how imperialism works. They are not, oh, we had neocolonialism failed. No, it's very much alive, thank you. If you go to any Latin America country, if you go to the Asian countries, I'll let you know how neocolonialism works. This is how it works, if I can show it. Oh, I can't show it. Anyway, the debt boomerang, the World Bank critical analysis, After the cataclysm, Noam Chomsky, Herman, they show even in those days where you said that the imperialism was vital and didn't need to, attack or some sort of. Those were the days when Vietnam War was going. What was that for? When imperialism was in vital state, not moribund. This is the IMF, how IMF works in countries like Turkey. I'll give you an example of what neocolonialism is. When Turkey won its independence in the Lausanne treaties, before signing it, they were negotiating with Lord Curzon of Britain and Turkey about sovereignty. And Lord Curzon, in the end, when they are signing it, says, "You guys are thinking about being sovereign, right? Yeah, sure, go ahead. I'll see you in a year or so when you come with your hat in hand begging for loans." And you know what happened? In a year or so, with hat in hand, Turkish rulers were going there begging for loans. And with those loans, and with the technology, the know-how, the licenses, and all those that were granted to Turkish bourgeoisie, Turkey was tied. There was nothing they could do. This is neocolonialism. So this is against imperialism? No, this is how imperialism works. It's a method they found very, very good, making people from those third world countries think that they are sovereign. It's a wonderful, ingenious way. And the nationalism in those countries, people from those countries, have a pride in thinking that they are sovereign and they decide by themselves. God, look at Turkey right now. They have paid for F-35 fighter planes, and United States will not give the planes and will not give the money back. Turkey is getting ready for a war. We were talking before the show about Syria. I think there's going to be a major war there. And Turkish Air Force is the #1 in that region. But Turkish Air Force has F-16s, which are ready to expire in 2 years. And they can't get the money or the parts to update their F-16s. And their F-35s don't come. When the war happens, what do you think will happen to Turkey? This is neocolonialism. Turkey wanted to sell its products, olive oil, in the Middle East region to its neighbors. United States come and said, don't even think about it, finish it. It was finished. Turkey was the #1 medicinal opium developer, opium grower. United States came and said, nah, you don't want to do this, get rid of it. Turkey eliminated every single field in Turkey that was growing opium. People were devastated. This is neocolonialism. Imperialism works with neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is the way imperialism gets into you, penetrates, and rules you with your own rulers, so that it fools you to think that Indian ruling class is ruling me. No, yeah, the Indian ruling class is the middleman for their boss, the imperialists. That's why the exploitation in countries like India, Turkey, are doubled, because the working class has to feed both its local bourgeoisie and the imperialists. That's double exploitation. That's why it's very dangerous there for revolutions and social unrest. And that's why you can't have bourgeois democracy. You can't handle this double exploitation with bourgeois democracy. You have to have an iron fist all the time. Oh, wow, wait a minute. In the imperialist era with the finance capital dictatorship, what do we call this? Fascism. So that's why those regimes are fascist, and the contradictions are due to imperialism that is working as the neocolonial. Neocolonialism doesn't mean going back to the old colonial ways where they have a colonial governor come in and rule you. Indians choose their own prison guards. Turkish people choose their own prison guards. They are in prison. You can't run a prison democratically. You can't have an sovereign prison without the prison owners. This is what imperialism is. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so what I want to do is encourage everybody to raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Our first person up will be Peter, followed by Lucy. And Peter, if you would unmute yourself, go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll just throw in my reaction to what I heard. I mean, this is a favorite topic of mine, and I just read Palme Dutt's Social Democracy and Fascism, which he wrote in like 1934 or 35. He was the founder of the British Communist Party. Great book, actually, if you ever need something to read about fascism. But of course, in that time, it was very early. It was very early in fascism. Hitler had just taken power, so he couldn't really provide a full analysis. But nonetheless, it was far more fact-based and historical and analytic than, I'm afraid, what I heard today, which, you know, interesting, but really more emotional and opinion than I heard analysis. Much of what I heard from the second speaker was very little different from what I've heard from all the Democratic Party talking heads. You know, some of these people I know, I have connections to the people that work in the White House, and this is exactly the same paradigm that they were using during the campaign. And, you know, as we all know, we saw Kamala Harris get up on CNN to declare that Trump was a fascist and very dangerous, and we should all vote against Trump because he's a fascist. And if we can't believe CNN, then who can we believe, of course? And likewise, if you remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where Biden did an address to the nation and declared that half of all the voters in the United States were semi-fascists because they voted for Trump. You know, this kind of hatred of the so-called, you know, ignorant workers, white workers that, you know, you hear from the liberal classes is, to me, repellent. It is just, you know, the most chauvinistic type of hatred against the working class. Yes, there are backward workers. There's no question about that. Yes, there are racists. Yes. Does that equal fascism? No. Does a reactionary bourgeois repressive government mean that it's fascist? No, that's not what fascism is. It really requires a real historical comparison of the development of fascism in those countries that had it, you know, was first mentioned, the decline of territory, the impossibility of exporting capital overseas, and therefore the need to conquer nations around the world. And, you know, if I'm also surprised that we didn't hear anything about the two cases, to me, that are most obviously fascist today, and that is Israel and Ukraine. Why? How come we have no analysis of those places where people are clearly coming out talking about genocide and extermination and wiping whole ethnicities off the face of the earth? That's where it's happening, in Ukraine and Israel. Where's the analysis of that? Anyway, that's just my first reaction, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit personal, but this is just really off the rails kind of discussion, which can really be kind of promote a really liberal worldview, which is, to me, is very foreign. Thanks.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have the opportunity for Raj and or Mehmet to respond, but if you could keep your responses really short, because I can't even see all the hands that are raised in my participant window. We've got so many people want to chime in. Next will be Lucy, but either Raj or Mehmet, please go ahead. Mehmet, why don't you, if you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you.
Just keep it to a minute or so, okay?
Sure, I will. I will. I don't think that the Democrats are saying what I'm saying at all, because I said with Trump or without, fascism was on the rise. And I said that the Democrats would love everything that Trump is doing. They will keep it because the system creates the leader, not that leader. Like Trump is not creating fascism. United States capitalism, imperialism has come to a stage where it requires a transition to fascism. And I don't care if the liberals are also calling a fascist. So what? There were a lot of liberals who called Hitler a fascist or Mussolini a fascist. So what? But it didn't change the fact that Hitler or Mussolini or Trump were fascists. But we have a different point of view. We are saying that capitalism that the Democrats are promoting and defending is the reason for fascism, because it has come to that level of moribund imperialism. Thank you.
That's it. That's good. Okay, Raj, if you want to.
Yeah, I don't have much to comment. I agree with Peter that what is happening, how Israel is acting, and how Ukraine is Ukrainian Nazis, and how Ukraine has been used as a proxy by the United States. There are, the idea is fascism there. But my point of view was different than Mehmet's. I do not believe, it's not for sure that fascism will develop in the United States. It didn't develop in 1930s when it could have, and it may develop now. I think under Trump, they're going to basically hoping to regenerate capitalism in the United States, and it will fail. And what happens afterwards depends on how left deals with that situation.
Okay, that's a time. Lucy, followed by Jean, followed by David Smokler. So Lucy, please unmute.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just had a question on the definition of imperialism, and mainly because I heard this from another YouTube video that I was watching. It has to do with the most advanced stage of imperialism that is now being called new imperialism. And it's characterized by a financial monopoly, but also by knowledge monopoly, which was something interesting because the U.S., if I understood it right, the speaker was saying that the intellectuals in this country, that it holds the people who have the highest level of knowledge, and it has accumulated these people, and so that they hold the world that it's mercy, because it has taken, which is something that we were talking about before, the privatization of knowledge and the capitalization of knowledge, and that has reached an unusual level of height under imperialism. And that was all. I was just curious about whether people had heard that or not, and what they were thinking about it. But yeah, I tend to agree with that. But on the question of whether we have fascism or not, I don't really have a position. But I do agree that fascism is a form of rule, that the imperialist, the empire has to save itself, and it may be reached that point where it has to reach out to a form of rule that would, but whether we have reached that point or not, I don't know. But
Okay.
it's like the good cop and the bad cop, and they're both bad.
Okay. All right. Comments from Raj or Mehmet? Short comments.
Just briefly on knowledge as a power. There is some Marxists believe knowledge power is a separate category like labor power. but I think that's outside of Marxism. So having highly developed specialized knowledge is always been part of rise of capitalism. I don't think it is anything new. It's just that it's more developed, and what it does, it helps increase productivity. That is the significance in production of surplus value.
Okay.
May I
Mehmet,
say
if you have a quick
something?
comment? Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with Raj that it's not a different category. And since 1940s, 50s, capitalists have been working on extracting that knowledge that the working class had in production and creating this managerial layer where that information gets given. And I think Henry Braverman has 2 volumes of books that document this on what they do, like many Taylorism and all those kind of work that takes that knowledge. And let's remember that in the old days, mathematics, physics was being taught by unions to the workers, and there were mathematics classes being held and everything, so that the production was in the hands of the workers, which made the capitalists very vulnerable. So this is a very planned way of extracting that knowledge from them and making workers disposable. So it's continuing the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Gene, followed by David Smokler. So, Gene, please go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank our comrades Raj and Mehmet for addressing this very important issue. And it really is important because people are being scared by this. It's scary what's going on. I know both my kids teach college students, and their Latino students are very much afraid of what's going to happen. And also, abortion rights are going to be under attack. And that's a whole nother topic, which we need to spend more time on. But I guess my question is, I really appreciate the discussion, but I didn't hear anybody mention Lenin's famous question, what is to be done? Or what should we be doing here? All right, this is horrible, what's going on. How do we fight back? And I know there are people like Reverend Barber and his Poor People's March. They're going to be marching on, I think, January 18th. There's the ACLU, which is doing a lot. Our own governor here in California, Governor Newsom, has allocated, I don't know how many $1 million to protect Californians from Trump. So there are fightbacks, there are things that are happening, and I think it's important that we do look at these things and support these movements. So, and I've made my donation both to the ACLU as well as my own organization, Veterans for Peace, which is not silent on these issues. Thank you.
Okay, next is David, I guess. Yeah.
Alan, before we go, just
I'm
very
sorry.
short.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, very short. Gene's concern is very, very valid. And that's why we need to act fast along with helping those. But more importantly, we need to, as Marxists, as the Marxists, we need to get behind a united front. Without that, we are nothing. And even more than that, what is to be done is to create a working class fighting party, independent working class party. Without that, we're just sitting ducks, okay? Without joining a united front, without a party, we are nothing. So I appreciate Gene's concern very much. Thank you.
And Raj, if you have a comment.
No, let's proceed.
Okay, let's go ahead with David. Please go ahead, followed by Janet.
Yes, I haven't heard anything about the People's Republic of China and the BRICS. and what role they play in this rising international tide of a moribund imperialism, fascism. I wonder if anybody could comment on that. Thank you.
Well, may I go first?
Yes, go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I think I view it as the BRICS is a association of countries that have capitalist mode of production, and they don't want to be controlled by the G7, their currency and their various ways they control the institution, IMF, World Bank, and so forth. So they formed this association, and I did mention that in my talk, in which People's Republic of China is the main constituent there, along with Russia and India. These are three main constituents, that South Africa and others. Already there are 10 now, and 10 or 12 more are waiting to get in. So I think this is basically what I call a democratic revolution at a geopolitical level. In other words, first stage is to basically escape the control of imperialism, the chain. This is the way they're trying to escape now, and I think they are going to succeed. And I believe that Trump represents acceptance that the United States is a declining power rather than an aggressive power, whereas the Democratic Party still wants to control the world. Trump's side has accepted it, and they're trying to refashion United States economy on the old capitalist lines in order to live within the system. So that would be my response.
Mehmet, do you wish to respond?
Very shortly. Yes, those countries are capitalist, and they are wannabe imperialist. They fought tooth and nail to be accepted by the G7, and they were rejected. That's why they are now forming this organization. Yes, there are, like the leading China has a lead on it, and of course it has more to gain, but Russia nearly begged on its bended knees to be accepted, but there was no place on the table for them. So they were told to eat crumbs under the table. So this is their reaction to it. But let's not forget that the contradictions of capitalism does not cease just because one or two countries seem to be against the alpha male leadership of the imperialist bloc. So I don't see much hope there. It may create cracks, but what are we doing as independent working classes of the world? Are we ready to exploit that cracks? That's what the problem is. We don't have a party, we don't have a movement, so we are just watching, observing, and wishing that Team A wins against Team B. So that's actually a very bad position to be. Thank you.
Okay, Janet, if you would go ahead, followed by Hobie. So Janet, please unmute.
Okay, I thought.
Go ahead, Janet, please. Go ahead.
I thought somebody else was going to.
Go ahead, Janet, please start. Please start.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So I kind of think the US has become something like an oligarchy underneath a plutocracy with the Constitution as its face. We have oligarchs such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, list goes on and on. But there are also old money oligarchs whose names we don't necessarily know. And it may have always been this way, not only in the US, but internationally. This is something that Sahai Bolson refers to as the empire of capital, or OCGFC, which means the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. So I'm wondering if Raj and Mehmet would want to comment on this and how it might fit into your presentations using, of imperialism and fascism. What about oligarchy, plutocracy, like that?
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention on the side that Butch Ware is going to have become a candidate for California governor for 2026.
He's the
Green Party.
Right. Okay. Raj?
Yeah, okay. I would say, well, Lenin in 1916 described the United States as an oligarchic system. So that's, the Rockefellers are the old oligarchs, for example, and there we have new ones. So it's an oligarchy for a long time. It just gets new oligarchs now in the Elon Musk is one of them. So yeah, it's an oligarchy, and it is in a stage of decay of parasitism and decay of capitalism. That's the stage it's in, and as I described, it receded from it for some time, went back into it again and again. This has been going on, and now it looks like it is very difficult for it to escape that. And then the alternative force, I disagree with Mehmet on alternative of BRICS as an imperialist formation. I don't think it's an imperialist formation, at least as of now. I think of them as largely productive capitalists versus non-productive. It's a finance capitalist is the character of G7, and productive capitalist is the character of the BRICS. That's how I see it.
Okay, Mehmet, please go ahead if you wish.
Yeah, first of all, oligarchy, of course, was there and will be there. That's how the classes align themselves and organize. But fascism, if it goes into, or bourgeois democracy, is a way of governance. How they govern the country, these oligarchs, determines whether it's going to be a bourgeois democracy or fascism. But coming to Raj, I did not say they were imperialists. They are wannabe imperialists, I said, wannabe. And given enough time, and if the world continues as it is now, with their development unimpeded, yes, they may become imperialists. But all the investments that China has, especially in Africa, it raises some eyebrows on what it is. And again, this is a transitional phase, and these are newcomers, new guys on the block. Let's see where it goes. Russia was the surprise because they really wanted that integration into the imperialist camp. They felt that they were ready. They have grown enough. They could be with the boys, but the boys rejected them. So is this a reaction, or is this an ingrowing will to have its own way? We are going to see that in the long run. Thank you.
Okay, next is Hobie, followed by Richard Wright. So Hobie, if you would unmute, please.
Right. Well, hi. Thanks a lot. I apologize a little late, but I was particularly taken by Mehmet's model distinguishing the neo-colonial regimes versus bourgeois democratic states. Particularly, he seemed to suggest that in the bourgeois states, fascism sort of comes and goes, that it's a phase shift or something to that effect. That certainly corresponds to my observations. And to some extent, it calls into question these calls for voting for Kamala to forestall fascism, all this other bullshit. And, and that was CP leadership telling us to do that. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. It seems to me that, in fact, fascism is a dagger that capitalism carries on its belt at all times. If you just look back, the Palmer raids, or, hell, the concentration camps of the Japanese Americans, McCarthyism, et cetera, COINTELPRO, Patriot Act, all along, it seems that we have eras of flat out fascism. And then, as Mehmet suggested, when it's in their interest, it goes back to some kind of, faux democracy. In any case, what I'm really interested in the what is to be done question. And frankly, I am unaware of any united front or popular front that began in a country that was taken over, or where there was a fascist attempt to take over, that was ever successful. Historically, I don't know, Vichy France was fascist, wasn't it? Or was it? Or what was it? But in any case, it seems to me that we got to get out of this focus on the stupid duopoly, the Democrats and the Republicans. I think Mexico really offers a very instructive model, AMLO, Morena, which began actually as a sort of diffuse movement of campesinos, workers, and others that gradually came together at local and regional levels and finally established an electoral presence, a successful one that bypassed the duopoly. And I'm wondering, I'd like to get their input on that. First of all, where, if ever, has there been a successful united or popular front? Or is that just hooey that the Communist Party trots out every time there's a Republican insurgency? And secondly, thoughts on perhaps AMLO and Morena as a potential model for us to contemplate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mehmet, if you have any comments, why don't you go first?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Germany in the beginnings, it did not prevent Nazism to come, but the strong workers' movement delayed. And certainly Nazism was not a given that had to happen. It was not, something that was written in stone that they had to go to Nazism. But the division of the working class, they could not get together and they could not fight well, brought Nazism. So they were successful. Nazis were successful. But I'd like to come to your question about the bourgeois democracy and fascism. I agree with you. That's how it is. And on another talk, I was given the example of a four-wheel drive vehicle. Remember, I said that the state is the central part of fascism, and that the bourgeois state is actually a bourgeois dictatorship. Let's not forget that. To me, that's more important than the democratic side of the bourgeoisie. It is a class dictatorship, and this dictatorship is built into the system. This is a class-based system. So you have a 4x4 vehicle with the 4x4 mechanics built in it, but it doesn't mean that you use it all the time. I'm talking about metropolitan countries. It is there. When the road gets rough, when you hit the rocks, then you engage the 4x4. It gets you out, hopefully, of that hard road, and then you go back to your normal operation. The reason I'm giving this example is that in the neo-colonial countries, dominated by imperialism, you use this 4x4 all the time because of your structure. Your bourgeoisie is not developed. Your bourgeoisie has not done its democratic revolution. You are under the exploitation of imperialism. The road is always rocky. You don't have the luxury to disengage the 4x4 and just go happily into the sunset. You have to use it all the time. That's why I'm talking about a permanent fascism in those countries that has to be fought. So, Mexico, one more. Yes, yeah. Mexico shows a very good example. We should follow it very closely and understand what's going on. But the state there has not been, is now silent. But let's see where this goes to, because we've seen many other countries, especially in the Latin America, where these kind of experiments happened and the imperialism and fascism turned back there using the state itself. So who owns the state? That's the question, and it will show you where this may go. Thank you.
Okay, Raj, please.
Yeah, I don't think fascism, US was fascistic. I mean, they were fascists in the United States and sympathetic to fascism. There was a section that wanted to go towards fascism in the crisis in 1930s, but the United States didn't go. And because unlike Germany, they didn't face this blocked market where your productive forces are developed and you can't have the markets. So that particular form of fascism that developed, I think that's a very specific form. We should not call everything that's we don't like as fascism. That then it loses meaning. It's a very particular form. About development of capitalism in the third world, this is where I differ with Mehmet, because India never had fascism since 1947 onwards when it got independence. It is today, some people left generally says it's kind of a neo-fascist rise, which captured power in 1998 and then lost it again and then back again. So it's neo-fascism. But even that is questioned. So it's different. Indonesia, for example, is not a new fascist, a third world fascist kind of thing. So I think this theory applies. There are countries like which had difficulty in nation building, which is Turkey is one of them. Identity of Turkey and Pakistan, Bangladesh. Those are the countries in which a kind of a strange thing happens where military becomes powerful and all these external powers can manipulate much more. So that would be my response.
Okay.
Alan, may I just say one thing?
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
sure.
Indonesia in 1965 killed 1.5 million people in a span of like about 2 weeks. And today, Indonesia celebrates those people who did the massacres and the genocide there. And they were mostly communists, the leftists, and the working class people. So this is the starting of Indonesia, the democratic Indonesia. Today, the same thing continues. You try to talk against this genocide, see what happens to you in Indonesia. And I'd like to ask an Naxalite in India whether they feel fascism is, in the government or not in India.
Okay, we'll give Raj a chance to respond.
No,
next is
I
Richard
think
Wright.
it's okay. I would not respond.
Okay.
Let's
All right,
move.
next is Richard Wright, followed by Mike. So Richard, please unmute.
Thank you. As I've been listening to this, it seems to me that we're coming from a model of fascism that was defined very much back almost 100 years ago now. And the world has become a very, 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 very different place. For example, back about 100 years ago, capitalism was still pretty much a paternalistic. It was still a, it was just starting to become an international phenomenon. Since then, we have seen we've seen these corporations, Apple, I think, Walmart, they're all transcending national boundaries. And I think that this is leading us, so I guess what I'm trying to suggest here is that we need to reevaluate what fascism is within the context, within a new material context. And so I have a whole bunch of other stuff I was gonna get into. For example, early on, and I think it was Raj's presentation. No, I won't. I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Comment, Raj or Mehmet? Any comments?
No, I think I'm
okay. Mehmet?
I think he's right. I think Richard is right that we need to re-examine in the new conditions how fascism has changed and what new forms it presents itself with?
No, you don't have to, not fascism, because fascism is really a tool of the bourgeoisie, of the capital, of the big bourgeois. So we need to re-examine the big bourgeois in terms of, we need to examine capitalism in terms of international, historic development. So,
Okay. Next is Mike, followed by Mark. So Mike, if you would unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, my question is based on a book I'm reading about Opus Dei. So apparently they started about 100 years ago in Spain, right after the liberals took over, and the men in power were terrified of the redistributionists, and they created their own anti-communist, anti-socialist organizations. But they fought among each other. I mean, it's not like all the people on the right gathered together like in Mussolini's Italy and became fascist. So you had these Opus Dei that were at odds with Phalangists, at odds with others. So my question is how these businessmen associations behind the scenes maneuver the levers of power in different countries such as Spain, which they weren't just in Spain, they were all over Latin America, and now they've taken over America in a way. They have people in the Supreme Court, and even J.D. Vance, I think, is Opus Dei. So that's my question, is how these men behind the scenes are able to, with just a handful of people, are able to wield so much power.
Okay. Raj, if you want to go ahead.
Well, the Powell, the guy who became Supreme Court judge, and basically he was earlier come up with a thesis, Powell thesis, where they're trying to reduce the influence of leftists in the universities and so forth. So United States, this is behind the scene. This is businessmen, when they see the working classes are supported by intellectuals and working classes making gains, at some point they want to push them down, and because their profits are affected. And that's what Powell doctrine was later on. Then Reagan came, and the offensive against gains of the working classes happened here. I am not familiar with Spain so much. I can't speak to that, but I can see it here. And then Reagan basically extended credit line, and that went into extreme raising the military industrial complex and so forth. So that kind of thing, businessmen behind, when they see a threat, they use institutions and they conspire to push down the progress of the working class. So that is always the case. I mean, and the working classes to have their institution to fight back. And in the United States, they were weakened earlier also, but particularly after the crisis, and then they shifted wholesale the capital to China. So the working class institutions have been weakened, and they have never recovered. They are recovering now. That's my answer.
Okay. Mehmet, did you have a?
Yeah,
Yeah.
coming to the power of the state, that is central to everything. Once you have that power in your hands, then you can do most about everything. And that's why, Leninism is the struggle to gain power. I mean, I agree with Raj. I mean, it's a systemic thing. And once you have that power, you're going to, look at the Dulles brothers. I mean, one was running the CIA, the other one's running the company, and whatever the company wanted, the state. Look at all the laws that passed. Barring the unions from supporting each other in case of a strike or general strikes and so forth. These were all requested by the capitals, and the state gives it to them from top down. And that's called the bourgeois dictatorship. And they do it in many different ways. They may have forms that look like democracy and whatever. But we have to see that this is a class dictatorship, and they do it from top down, whatever they want to. Thank you.
Okay, next is Mark, followed by Sharon. We're getting close to the end here, so go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. Owing to Mehmet's point about fascism and colonialism and imperialism, in Mussolini's Doctrine of Fascism, June 1932, this is what he says. First of all, as regards the future development of mankind, and quite apart from all present political considerations, fascism does not, generally speaking, believe in the possibility or utility of perpetual peace. It therefore discards pacifism as a cloak for cowardly supine renunciation and contradistinction to self-sacrifice. War alone keys up human energies to their maximum tension and sets the seal of nobility on those peoples who have the courage to face it. Therefore, all doctrines which postulate peace at all costs are incompatible with fascism. Equally foreign to the spirit of fascism, even if accepted as useful in meeting special political situations, are all internationalistic or league superstructures which, as history shows, crumble to the ground whenever the heart of nations is deeply stirred by sentimental, idealistic, practical considerations. He's telling you right here that once power is consolidated, where does fascism have to go? It's like anything else. We're talking about the nature of man here, perhaps more than just fascism, democracy, socialism, republicanism, whatever case it is. And let's understand something about fascism. It's a draconian version of capitalism. And let's understand something too about this. Go back to Mussolini for a moment. Did he take power or was it given to him? Hitler, did he take power or was it given to him? Trump, did he take power or was it given to him? You see a trend here? I do. The basis of a fascist state is a corporate fascist state as outlined by Mussolini. Corporations and large financial institutions run the economy. The worker is second to the state. The only liberty worth having is the liberty of the state. America has conformed to a corporate fascist state, the basic ideal, for decades. This has developed long before Trump even thought of running. In fact, let's as a starting point, go back to the Lewis Powell memo of August 1971, which I see as a manifesto of American fascism. It took a while to evolve here, but it did evolve. And this is the situation we're left with. And one more aspect here, if you think the American public is going to straighten this out in the voting booth, I will remind you that 53% of those in the age group of 16 to 74 are on a 6th grade reading level. That's 130 million of your fellow citizens. You might think that this is going to solve the problem. I admire your confidence, as misplaced as it is.
Okay, I think we're going to go to Sharon. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we should not drop out the following. We're historical materialists, and when we examine the history of imperialism and fascism, we need to take into account the role of war. I think no matter who's in power, whether it's a democratic, air quotes, democratic form or a more brutal, what we might call fascist form of rule, it's characterized by racism and war are the two pillars, I suppose there are others, but two major pillars of that rule. And therefore, I think that it's important to build a united front against war and racism. In my opinion, the Second World War, as the alliance that developed, that eventually defeated fascism, in the Second World War was a united front, internationally speaking. And that was the last just war that the working class of any country, international working class, should have supported.
Let me go ahead and move on to the next. Go ahead.
My final sentence, Alan, is we should look at the coming war, that they've been completely open about it. It's written down. They're going to make war on China.
Any comments from
profit.
our speakers? Briefly.
I don't think on Mark's comment, I really don't think Powell's memo necessarily means we have fascism. I don't agree with that. I mean, they will beat down working class whenever there is gain. So it's a reversal. I agree, but it's not fascism, because bourgeois democracy is about representing capital rule over the population, workers. So in general, that I think it is a very specific thing. And as what I agree with Sharon, racism, war are two components of very strong components in aggression. But even that doesn't by itself define, because USA had racism and it has been making war, but I wouldn't call it fascism. Fascism is a very specific form. That's all.
Okay, Laura, followed by Judith, and then we're going to have to wrap this up. So Laura, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick, although it's a big question. It has to do with what do we do next? And it's about creating that political party for the United Front. And so my question, which cannot be answered in a minute or two, is how do we do that? And what could make the Green Party into that party for the United Front? Because one of the things I want to point out about the Green Party is that it doesn't take corporate money. It's not fascist direction at all. It's the largest national party, the national party that was anti-war in this last election. And it's, as Janet mentioned, Butch Ware, yesterday he said that all what this Green Party stands for is what would help workers, would help Black people, would help Latinos. And yet it's not a workers' party, a Black people's party, a Latinos party. What could be done in order to, create a party that has the same policies or whatever, or turn the Green Party into that force, given the structures that we have, which is no proportional representation, which Mexico has and 90 other countries in the world have, all of that. So that's the question.
Mehmet, do you want to comment on that?
Very shortly, that is a whole session by itself. Thank you for bringing Laura. Not only Green Party, but there are so many different leftist parties as well. So that is something we need to bring here and discuss. We really need that in order to move towards a united front that is sorely needed. Thank you.
Okay, last commenter is Judith. So please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, all right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry that I missed almost everything. I had trouble with my phone. I couldn't get into the meeting until very late. Okay, so you seem to claim that that no countries have escaped neocolonialism, but I'd like to give the example of Russia, which was well on the way to becoming a total neocolonial country, but Putin managed to rescue it from that position. And the reason he was able to do that successfully was because of a large presence of nationalistic bourgeoisie in that country who supported him. And okay, I'd like you to comment on that. Also, I don't think currently there is no fascism in the United States except the kind of repression that occurs with the very lowest classes. But if what we have here is a kind of a soft fascism. The brainwashing is so total that people just resist forming working class organizations because they've been convinced that it's either ineffectual or fascistic or just bad. But if the working class in this country were to successfully organize, then I think we would see the heavy hand of fascism descend upon us. So that's all.
Okay, so I want to give our both of our speakers opportunity to respond briefly because we're already over 12:30. So please go ahead. Mehmet, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I could. Thank you for that thought. But let's remember that Russia did not, by its own will, left the imperialist bloc or I don't know, escaped from it. Yes, they were rejected, and Putin did have a lot of fight internally to go over the oligarchs that really wanted to integrate to imperialism. And he had to convince them that, no, we are not wanted. And so he had to put a lot of pressure on those oligarchs. And he was successful. I give you that. He was successful. But what helped him was that the socialist base that Russia had before the fall of the Soviet Union, and the wealth of the sources of the country with this oil and coal and so on and so forth was so great that Putin was able to convince and nukes, thank you, to convince the oligarchs that, hey, we can do this alone. Let's try it because they are not accepting us. So that was actually Russia is a very curious case to examine in this context. Thank you.
Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, no, nothing to add here. I agree with Mehmet, but I don't agree that it was the intention even of predecessor Boris Yeltsin to become a third world, or I mean, you can't both be imperialist and a vassal, So I think they wanted to be equal, and they were sort of, you can't be equal. And I don't think it was an intention to become an imperialist country to colonize others or try to take advantage of others. I don't think that was their intention. But be that as it may, that's all
I mean, I meant that Russia would have been turned into a neo-colonial colony.
Yeah, it didn't, and Mehmet has said it, and I think I don't disagree with Mehmet's explanation on that. I think that's right. National industries like military industrial complex and energy industries were able to. Those were the reasons why it didn't happen.
Yeah, and I also think you're right
we're
about
actually
the
over
communist
time now.
base.
I want to thank everybody for participating today. There was a very good discussion. I especially want to thank our presenters who stepped up and gave some good presentation, good issues. We have to continue the discussion. I want to remind you to go to ICSSmarx.org and sign up for our email list. And next week's session is going to be very interesting. On the ground, report back, analysis of what's going on the Indian subcontinent, where there are world historical changes taking place. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and we're going to hopefully see you guys next week. Thank you very much.
Those who want to copy the chat, give them a moment to copy the chat.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to end it, Roger. You can go ahead and end it if you want.
Okay. I will wait a minute. If you have to leave, Alan, go ahead.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, at yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.